All layouts need buffer stops, but what's the best way to light them? In the previous video, we were focused on trying to improve the appearance of your track, such as by spraying it with sleeper grime prior to ballasting, and also bringing out the rail rust colour, using a little wheel device to put the paint on, something you need to do really before you ballast. And during that layout, during that video, I showed you the end of a parcels line, a parcels line siding. Well, at the end of that siding, naturally, I will have a buffer stop, and what I normally use is these cheap and cheerful buffer stops from Pico, which is the SL40, and they retail at a staggering £1.40, and when they're finished look something like this. Kind of good to go. But Gauge Master, through Train Tech, actually make now a illuminated buffer light, and for £10.75 or thereabouts in a pack, you get a pack of 2. Opening them up, that's clearly easier said than done. Inside you get the 2 lights and a small set of instructions. The lights look absolutely fine, and if I put it in place, it couldn't really be easier to install. So if I pop that buffer just in front of it, you get the kind of general appearance of what it will look like. And so here it is in place, and you can hopefully see that the lights are quite bright. If I turn track power on and off, you can see them come on and off, which is a useful aspect to this, because if you have a short circuit and you don't really know what's going on and your DCC locos have all stopped, if you take a glance at your buffer stops and it's off, then clearly you know that you've lost track power. If of course it's on, then your fault may lie somewhere else, such as, you know, bad contacts from the wheels picking up power from the track. So it can be a good asset. But the lights are also good for both DC and DCC, except when you use them in DCC, there's a difference. So if I just read what's in the instructions, the buffer light will work on both DCC and conventional 12 volts DC systems. With DCC, both of the red lights stay on with a constant brightness all of the time that the track is powered. On DC systems, only one light will come on and will vary in brightness depending on the controller settings. Note that if points etc. isolate a section of track where the buffer is fitted, it will not light. The buffer light uses low power LEDs for the lights, and because the whole product takes less than 2 milliamps, just 0.02 of an amp, almost any controller can power them on your layout. And that's kind of quite straightforward. But personally on my layout, I don't want 2 lights, and I'm a DCC layout kind of guy. I wanted a more traditional 1960s, 70s type light, so I want to remove one of the lights. And having spoken to the chap from Traintronics when they originally came out on the market, he reckoned that if you just snip off the top light, just underneath the light, not just above the lower light, but just below the top light, then the single light will work. So we'll try it. Let's give it a go. So now hopefully you can see there's the two LEDs, which are obviously red, and between them there is a tiny little round contact piece, and that round contact piece needs to be left, and you mustn't cut that piece off, otherwise you have to do a little bit of minute soldering. So hopefully I'm feeling lucky that I will just take onto there and cut the top one off. And hopefully you can see now if it focuses up. Hopefully you can see that the top one's removed. It's a bit slightly wonky, so I'll just correct that with a little file. So now hopefully when I fit this, it should still work. And there it does. I shall just switch it with the one on the buffer. And here it is now with a little bit of rust paint added around. So it sort of blends it in a little bit better. It's hard to see from this video, but these lights are very bright. So what you can do is add a resistor into the circuit so as to bring down the power that's available for the LED, and therefore it appears a lot less bright and perhaps a little more in keeping with what they would look like in reality. So this is a pack of resistors made by Velleman, and hopefully there should be a link to them in the See More tab below. And there's various resistance to these resistors, if that makes any sense. There's numerous from 10 ohms right through to 820 kiloohms. So now I think we should fit something like a 100k resistor and see if it dims down this buffer stop to a more acceptable level. I hope you can see the difference when I put the resistor on and off, because obviously with the camera it's not that easy, but please believe me with the commentary when I say yes, this looks better or this looks worse. Now this is a little bit of a lash up with a Bachmann Dynamis. So I've used a set of jump leads here, and you can see them going to the rails, and then hopefully you can see just in front of my fingers there I've put in a 100 ohm resistor to drop the power down. So if we then go and take a look at the buffer stop, so this is with the 100 ohm resistor in place, and this is without the 100 ohm resistor, and hopefully you can see the difference, and you may or may not agree that the 100 ohm resistor makes it look a little more realistic. However, I think it does look a little too dark, so I'll switch from a 100 ohm resistor to one of a lower value. So after fitting various resistors, the one in place now is a 27 kilo ohm resistor, and to me that looks about right. If I just switch it from the 27k back to without the resistor at all, so that's without and that's with, without and with. The change is subtle, but there is a distinct change. So if you're like me and you're not happy, you do wish to lower the intensity of the buffer light, then you need to put in a resistor. But the thing to remember, of course, is you have to supply that small piece of track at the end where the buffer sits with a separate feed. What you can't do is obviously fit the resistor onto the track power, because then you'll be reducing the track power across the whole layout. So it's just a separate feed just to that resistor. And of course, if you're using computer control with block occupancy, then clearly you need to power the resistor from a separate feed, otherwise the block would appear to be occupied and the computer will think there's a loco in that block because you're drawing current from it. I know that's a bit bewildering, but if you're into computer control, then hopefully you'll know what I mean. Well, that more or less wraps this video up. Just as a reminder, the The buffer lights were made by Gauge Master, and they're the GM56, and for the two it cost me £10.75, and for the pack of Velman resistors there was a set of 610, and it's the E12 series should you wish to go down the avenue of dimming them down if you're into DCC and that kind of thing. Of course, because I decided to cut the top of the buffer light off, it's because I wanted to make it my own. It's like a lot of things. I've did a video on class 37 of repainting the nose and doing head codes and all these kind of things. And it's the way you put your own kind of fingerprints on your layout to make them different than everyone else's, and that's kind of what I like. The double buffer stop light is a modern thing. They're in stations today, and they weren't around in an area in a time which I'm trying to replicate, of the 1960s, 1970s. And of course they're never as bright as they would, but they're a useful asset. If you're into computer control, then you would have one of those per power district. So if you've got a power district go down, you can easily look at your buffers and figure out which one it is. But there we go. So hopefully that wraps it up, and any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And if you want me to cover a future topic that you feel strongly about, whether it's airbrushing or whatever, I'll gladly kind of give it a go. In the meantime, of course, there should be a subscribe button just here, and another video here and here. And until next time, take care and thanks a lot. Bye bye.